I don't know if you know this, but priests feel a lot of pressure on Easter Sunday. There's so many details to keep track of. Everything has to be right. There's a fire to light outside at the early service. There's extra food. You need coffee because the people are really going to lose it if there's no coffee. Everything has to be right. And I know it's not just me. I know all of you have pressure on Easter. You're meeting with family. You're getting together with relatives. Everyone wants to get the kids dressed up. The kids are arguing. They don't understand. Why? Where are we going? What is happening? The pressure we all have of Easter Sunday. But really, this pressure is something we all feel every day. I recently read in the United States, we are more depressed than we have ever been. And of course, we all know social media is getting a lot of the blame. And I'm sure we've all heard this. We probably all understand why, but there have been studies that have proven that social media activates the dopamine centers in our brain, and that people use social media to find approval, a feeling of belonging, which they don't always find. People don't post their worst pictures on social media. Have you noticed that? And so people come searching for community or approval, and they notice no one's interacted with my post or my picture. And then they see all of these other people doing fun things, looking perfect, looking happy. 20 years ago, we probably would not have been invited to the party, but 20 years ago, we didn't know. It's called FOMO, fear of missing out. And you can find thousands of articles about it online if you'd like to dig into that. But this morning, I just want to mention one associated problem. We think we need to look perfect, to have it all together. So if we can't manage that, what we do, especially if you're under 40, 45, is you go out of your way to convey the opposite message. You make sure everyone understands that you don't care and that you're putting in as little effort as possible into whatever you're attempting, because you wouldn't want anyone to think you would be less than perfect if you were actually trying. Maybe this is another way to say this. I have a college friend who is in France right now, and I'm going there for my 20th anniversary this summer. So I texted him and I said, "What's everybody wearing in France right now? So I can fit in when I go, so I don't look like a tourist." And he said, "Everyone's dressed in neutral colors or gray, and especially black, mostly sweats. And if you want to fit in, wear gray or black and a hoodie while sulking." Said if you really want to fit in, you should hold a cigarette while you're doing that. And I thought, that sounds just like Shawnee. A member of my family, the only one who's not a girl, said to me, "I tell you every week, should I wear the gray or the black this week, sweats?" Does everyone know what I'm talking about? I would like for you to repeat after me. In the Episcopal Church, we have call and response. So repeat after me. This is malarkey. It's the strongest word I could find. If this is true, we are in big trouble. Because, and I need you to repeat after me again, the best lessons that I will learn in life come from failure. If you don't try, you won't learn anything. We cannot be afraid to try. We cannot be afraid of failure. I could tell you right now 100 stories of awful, ridiculous mistakes that I have made as a priest or as a youth minister. Why, just this morning at the 9 o'clock service, somebody was being a thurifer for the first time, and his name might be John. And while the Melissa Cam was singing the anthem, John said, "Oh, we better go." So he started the procession, and he just started walking in. And I know he learned from that failure. It'll never happen again, will it? See? That's how it works. We learn from our failures. I heard the story, Francis Chan had a famous mistake in a sermon. He was worried that his congregation was getting all of their spiritual knowledge from him. And so to illustrate that, he had this great idea that he would put balloons under his shirt so it looked like he had breath. And he went up to preach the sermon, and he said, "All of you don't need to be constantly feeding from me like you're infants and I'm your mother. You need to go out and read the Bible yourself." And everyone would know that was an awful mistake, right? Terrible idea. But we learn from our mistakes. I'm saying all that to say this. We have finished our Lenten journey. Some of us have been reading Scripture. Some of us have been praying the daily office. Some of us have been meditating or having times of silence. Some of us have been fasting. We've given up things. We've taken things on. We've been reading books. We've done all of this preparation, all for what? Why? And this morning I would like to tell you that on this Easter morning, Jesus would like for all of us to take all of that preparation and go and do something. Just do something good. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. You don't need to wait for the leading from the Lord like I used to think when back in my evangelical youth minister days. He's already told you some good stuff to do. You just need to go and do it. And I can prove to you this morning that Jesus would like for you to go and do something good just by asking you one simple question. You're going to have to remember now and think about the gospel reading this morning and tell me, what was Jesus wearing in our gospel reading? Don't be afraid of failure. It's okay. The gospel reading tells us that Jesus' clothes, his grave clothes, were left in the tomb, lying on the stone slab. And in a typical Jewish burial, the body's placed on the slab, and the family tomb is sealed, and then later, when the body has decomposed and it's just bones, you take the bones off the slab, put them on a shelf, and then you prepare the slab for the next family member who will need it. And archaeologists have found many first century era graves in the Jerusalem area with bones that were never put up because Jerusalem was destroyed, because the family was not around to complete the burial. This happened a lot to first century graves in Judea. But in John's gospel, the grave clothes are lying there where the body had been, some of them neatly folded, as if the body had deflated like a balloon and disappeared. It's an extra detail that I just can't help but notice. And if his clothes are the only thing left in the tomb, what in the world is Jesus wearing? I think the writers would have mentioned if he were naked, First century people are less squirmish than we are, but still, it seems like they would have mentioned it. I think they would have mentioned, were he wearing a kingly robe? We don't know what he was wearing. All we know is Mary saw him and thought he was the gardener. So whatever the first century equivalent of a wide-brimmed hat and green Crocs was, that's what Jesus is wearing. And you might be asking yourselves why. Why is Jesus dressed like a gardener? Why that? It's a good question. It's a good word or image to use to describe Jesus. And I think that Jesus is dressed as a gardener because Jesus is always working in the soil of my life and your life to produce fruit. Think about Mary, who met Jesus at the tomb. In popular imagination, Mary was a prostitute who was secretly married to Jesus. And it had to have been a man who came up with that theory. All the scripture tells us about this Mary in John's gospel is that she's from the town of Magdala, that Jesus healed her from demon possession, and that she's with a large group of women and a large group of men who follow Jesus and the 12. We also know she's a single woman. We also know single women had low respect in this society. And so the soil society sought to plant Mary in had clear limitations on who she could be, what she could do, who she could become. But Mary, who isn't much in her society, is the first to see the risen Christ. She becomes the first apostle. Apostle means one sent. And she is the apostle to the apostles. She is sent to go and tell the other disciples, I have seen the Lord. And that's the kind of thing Jesus does in our life. The second reason Jesus looks like a gardener on that first Easter day is that this is the first day of the new creation. Any good work of literature has the end mirror the beginning. Like the thesis and the conclusion. And so John's gospel works the same way. It begins with, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it takes our mind back to Genesis, to the creation, to the garden, where Adam and Eve were there and God gave them two jobs. Be fruitful and multiply and tend the garden. Take care of the animals, the plants, the mountains, the streams, the water, everything. Take care of each other. Tend the garden. Be an image bearer of God and tend the garden. And we know how well it went. And we know how well it's going. When all of this is mirrored in John's gospel. On Good Friday, like the Father at the creation on the sixth day, Jesus says it is finished. Then he rests on the seventh day, what we call Holy Saturday. The living Word, the light in the darkness, is dead in a tomb. But today is different. Easter is different. That first Easter is like the eighth day. It's like Bill Murray at the end of the movie Groundhog Day. That alarm has been going off, playing the same song for the whole movie, and then finally we get to the end and it plays the same song, but then it's a mistake and a new song starts. It's a new day, finally. This is the new day. And so we're here at the end of John's gospel, and like the beginning, we have a man and a woman in a garden. I'm not asking you to believe this, because none of us can comprehend this. How do you comprehend someone who's alive and physical, but also eternal and living in heaven and earth at the same time, beyond death, beyond decay, but somehow here. We can't comprehend it. All we can do is hope. It's no accident that Mary mistook Jesus for a gardener. He was, and he is. He's dressed as a gardener, and he's asking us to put on our Crocs and our wide-brimmed hat and join him in the work of making his will be done on earth as it is in heaven.